to get this photograph from a local fisherman named Joe, and the timestamp is 6:34 p.m.
After days of sitting with her reporting, measuring it against the public record, and cross-checking what Karli Aylesworth and Steve Hansen have said in multiple televised interviews, is that the fisherman's account is not a loose claim. It is a piece of physical evidence that sits on top of the timeline Brian Hooker gave the world and disagrees with it by almost an hour. That is the case this episode is about, and it is the reason the story has moved so decisively in the last 7 days.
The moment Brian Hooker stepped off that island and boarded a plane home, Karli was already in the air heading the other way. She landed in Abaco, walked straight to that boat, sat on it, and started talking to her mother like she was still there.
How does it feel to be here, to be back here with everything that's happened?
It's making it a little bit more real. A lot of sadness. Like when I first got here, I sat up on there and looked at the boat and started talking to her like she was here.
What did you say to her?
I was like, hey mom, I'm here wherever you are. Like, I just want to talk to you and see.
Then she saw the footage. 3 hours inside that police station later, she walked out and said 6 words that nobody was ready for. I feel like this was pre-planned. And Ashleigh Banfield, she was already on that island before any of them, already walking the same dark water Brian said he paddled through alone, already asking the questions that were quietly dismantling everything he told the world. Because that island saw everything, and it was finally starting to talk. Now, before we get into what Karli found and what Ashleigh Banfield uncovered on the ground, we need to talk about something that happened the day before Karli even landed. Because while the whole world was watching this story unfold, Brian Hooker made a move that nobody saw coming. He left. Brian Hooker had told several news outlets on Tuesday morning that he would remain on the island to search for Lynette. He said finding her was his sole focus. Then, the very next day, he boarded a plane and flew back to the United States, landing in Atlanta. Let that sink in for a second. This is a man whose wife of 25 years is still missing. Her body has never been found. The search is still active. The investigation is still open. And he told the world, on camera, on the record, that he was staying, that he would never stop looking. And then he left. His attorney gave a reason. She said Brian had received urgent word that his mother was gravely ill and that he had traveled to the United States to be at her bedside. Maybe that's true. But here's the thing. Karli Aylesworth, the woman whose mother is still missing underwater in a foreign country, she wasn't buying it. Karli told Fox News Digital that Brian's mother had been terminally ill for a while. This wasn't sudden news. This wasn't an emergency that came out of nowhere. And then she said something that cut through all the noise. I think it shows his character. He somehow lost my mom at sea and cries on camera saying he'll never stop searching, then leaves the next day. That's a daughter, grieving, furious, and still fighting, even from thousands of miles away. But she wasn't going to stay thousands of miles away for long. Before we go any further, if this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, hit that like button right now. Share this video, because Lynette Hooker deserves more eyes on this case. And subscribe if you haven't already, because we are going to stay on this story until there are answers. On Thursday, April 16th, the same day Brian landed back in America, Karli Aylesworth and her partner Stephen Hansen touched down in Marsh Harbor, Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas. Think about that timing. He goes one way, she comes the other. She wasn't sent by anyone, no agency called her, no authority asked her to come. She came because she is a daughter, and her mother is gone. And nobody, not Brian, not the police, not the courts, was going to stop her from standing on that island and demanding the truth. Karli and Stephen said they had already given a statement to Bahamian police and planned to retrace Lynette's last steps. She went to the boat first, the Soulmate, the sailboat Brian and Lynette had been living on, the vessel that was supposed to be their retirement dream floating on paradise water. And when she got there and looked at it, she didn't rage, she didn't collapse, she sat down, and she talked to her mom. When I first got here, I sat up there and looked at the boat and started talking to her like she was here, she said. I need you to stop for a second and feel that. This young woman flew across the country to sit on a boat, the last place her mother lived, and just talked to her, because that's all she had left. That's what this case has done to this family. Then she went to the police. 3 hours. 3 hours she sat in that station, going through everything, asking every question, pushing for every detail. And when she came out, I feel like this was probably pre-planned, if anything, like it doesn't seem like just some accident, she told NBC News. Pre-planned. That's the word of someone speculating wildly. That is a daughter who has been watching, listening, and piecing together everything, and arriving at a conclusion that terrifies her. But what exactly led her there? What had she seen? What did she know? Because here's where this story gets very, very cold. And quickly, a genuine thank you to everyone watching and supporting this channel. You keep showing up, you keep sharing, you keep caring about cases like Lynette's when it would be easier to just scroll past. This community exists because of people who believe that real stories deserve real attention. That means everything. Now let's keep going, because Lynette deserves every second of it. To understand why Karli's words hit so hard, you have to understand exactly what Brian told police, because his story is the foundation of this whole case. And once you hear it laid out, detail by detail, you'll start to hear the cracks too. Brian and Lynette left the Abaco in turn at around 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, April 4th, 4 minutes after sunset, on a small dinghy headed to their yacht anchored at Elbow Cay. A small 8-foot dinghy, at night, just the two of them. Brian told officials that while they were on the dinghy, Lynette fell into the water, and she fell in wearing the ignition key, which is also the engine's safety lanyard, a cord designed to cut power if the operator falls overboard. With no key, the engine shut off instantly because she had the key on her. And now he's stuck, no power, on a tiny boat, in the dark, in rough water. He says he last saw his wife swimming towards the shore. Swimming towards the shore. Not drowning, not screaming. Swimming. Away from the boat. Away from him. And Brian, who's a former Marine, says he couldn't reach her. Says the currents were too strong. Says the winds took them apart. So he paddled. Without power, he says, the dinghy eventually drifted through the Sea of Abaco and washed ashore near Marsh Harbor,
arriving at a boatyard at 4 a.m. 4 in the morning. So we're looking at roughly 8 to 9 hours between the moment he says Lynette went overboard and the moment he reached shore and called for help. 8 to 9 hours. And nobody is asking why? Nobody thought that number was strange? Huh? Somebody did. And that somebody works at a bar on Elbow Cay. And what he said next is where Brian's story starts to quietly fall to pieces.
His name is Ken. He's 38 years old. He works at the Abaco Inn on Elbow Cay, and on the evening of April 3rd, the night before Lynette vanished, he served Brian and Lynette Hooker at the pool bar. According to Ken, the couple arrived at approximately 4:30 p.m. Lynette headed to the pool ahead of Brian, while Brian came straight to the bar and ordered 2 rum and cokes, paying by card and speaking very little. Ken described Brian as tall, tattooed, quiet. He said he seemed like an old war veteran, nothing alarming, just a guy having drinks with his wife by the pool on a beautiful evening in the Bahamas. The couple stayed for about 2.5 hours. Roughly 90 minutes in, Brian came back to the bar and ordered another round. Normal enough, right? Vacation, drinks, sunset, paradise. But here's the thing that Ken can't shake. And it's not about what he saw that night. It's about what he knows about those waters. Ken pointed out that the distance between Abaco Cay and Marsh Harbor is only about 4 miles. It's only 4 miles that way. It shouldn't have taken 8 to 10 hours to get there. Even if he was only floating, it should have been a much quicker time, he said. 4 miles, 8 to 10 hours? You don't need to be a sailor to feel that something is wrong with that math. Even if the water was rough, even if he was paddling by hand with no engine, 4 miles should not take 8 to 10 hours. So where was Brian Hooker during all that time? What was happening on that water in the dark? And here's the detail that truly makes your skin crawl. The one thing that Ken said almost as a side note, but that nobody should overlook. During the entire 2.5 hours the couple was there, Ken never actually saw or spoke directly with Lynette. Brian was there. Brian was at the bar. Brian was ordering drinks for both of them. But Lynette? She was at the pool. Separate. Out of sight. The last known photo of Lynette Hooker alive was taken at that pool that evening. She's smiling. She's in a green cover-up. She looks completely fine. And then she left with Brian, and nobody ever saw her again. Now, this is the part your audience has been waiting for, and I want you to pay very close attention because this is where Ashleigh Banfield's reporting becomes critical. While on the ground in the Bahamas, Ashleigh Banfield obtained a newly surfaced photo showing Lynette in the hour leading up to her disappearance. One photo, taken at the Abaco Inn, showing Lynette, alive, poolside, in the last hour before she and Brian got on that dinghy and headed into the dark. Now here's why that photo matters so much. It's not just proof that Lynette was there, or that she was alive, or even that she was with Brian. It's about what the photo shows and what it proves about Brian's timeline. The last known photo of Lynette shows her wearing a green cover-up, and that detail became significant because it is clothing Brian never mentioned. Small detail? Maybe. Or maybe not. Because in a case where a woman's body has never been found, where the only account of what happened on that water comes from one man, the husband, every single detail matters. What she was wearing, what time the photo was taken, whether it matches what Brian told police. And investigators? They were paying attention. New photos and video from Lynette's last night alive were raising serious questions about Brian's original account of events and the timeline he gave investigators. This is a developing investigation. The details are still being pieced together, but what Ashleigh Banfield found on the ground, combined with what Karli confirmed in that police station, is building something that Brian Hooker cannot simply explain away with a story about dark water and strong currents. And there is one more person who has something to say about all of this. Someone who was there before the sun came up on April 5th. Someone who physically helped Brian Hooker out of the water that morning. And what he told Ashleigh Banfield about how Brian looked, what he said, and what didn't add up, is something we are going to uncover next. Remember, we left off with a question. Brian Hooker says he paddled through dark water for up to 9 hours, says his wife went overboard just 150 yards from shore, and he couldn't get to her. Says he watched her disappear into the current. But someone was waiting on the other side of that water when Brian finally arrived. His name is Jim Todd. He's a member of the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue Service, and he was one of the very first people to encounter Brian Hooker the morning after Lynette vanished. He helped pull Brian onto the rescue boat himself. And here is what he told Ashleigh Banfield on the record.
Here's a dilemma that's unanswerable. Brian said that his wife was driving the dinghy. He probably did. He happened to mention to me when I was with him and returning him from Marsh Harbor to his boat. Now let's go back to that night at approximately 6:30 or 6:45 or 7 o'clock. Sure, typically men drive of a sailing couple. The man might be the one most common to drive the dinghy. But if a man were to pass the controls over to his wife, that would be an indication that the water was very safe, that it was daylight. So if it was getting a little dark, if it was very windy, like I feel like it could have been at least later, then he would have said, I'm going to drive. 99.9% of all men would say, this is tough, I'm going to drive.
Neither of them would have been driving in 2 to 4 foot seas in that little dinghy, but let's just say they got caught in 2 to 4 foot seas when they came out of White South Channel. I do believe you're right. I don't think that the weaker person, be it a man or a woman, would have been at the helm. I think the stronger U.S. Marine would have said, let me take over here. This could be hairy.
I would go so far as to say, no way, in bad weather, would he not be at the control.
Jim got Brian up on the bow of the rescue boat and asked him to point to exactly where Lynette had gone overboard. Brian pointed to a spot near the channel's final piling, only about 150 yards from shore. 150 yards. That is not far. That is not open ocean. That is not some vast, impossible stretch of black water. 150 yards is roughly the length of 1.5 football fields from dry land. And Lynette Hooker, according to her own daughter, was an experienced swimmer. A woman who had been sailing for over 10 years, a woman who paddleboarded, who snorkeled, who lived for the water. She was physically fit, she was strong, and she was only 150 yards from shore. But here's where Jim's account gets even more unsettling. Brian couldn't seem to say clearly whether his wife was swimming toward the beach or swimming away from their yacht, the Soulmate, which was over 1,000 yards away. He didn't know which direction his wife was swimming. Think about what that means. You watch your wife go overboard, she's alive, she's swimming, and you cannot tell investigators the next morning whether she was swimming toward land or swimming away from it. That is not grief clouding memory. That is a critical detail, and Brian Hooker could not get it straight. Ashleigh Banfield also noted something else from her time on the ground, that at 7:30 p.m., the time Brian says Lynette went overboard, there was still enough light to see someone in the water. Brian said it was pitch black, that the darkness made it impossible. But Banfield, standing in that same location, said that at that hour there is still visible light, still enough to see a person, still enough to search. So why didn't he? Why didn't a former Marine, a man who by his own description loved his wife of 25 years, dive in after her? Why didn't he drop anchor right there and search? Why did he paddle away? These are the questions that nobody can answer, and nobody is asking them louder than the women who loved Lynette most. Now I need to introduce you to someone who has been in the background of this story, watching, grieving, and now finally speaking. Lynette's mother. Her name is Darlene Hamlett.
And what she told Ashleigh Banfield on Drop Dead Serious is something that will stay with you long after this video ends. Darlene told Banfield that she had long feared something like this could happen. With the lifestyle that my daughter and her husband live, I had been preparing for that phone call for a long time. A mother who had been preparing for the call that her daughter was gone. Let that land. She wasn't shocked when she heard. She was devastated, of course, but she wasn't shocked because she had watched this relationship for years. She had seen the highs and she had seen the lows. There was a lot of good times and bad times in my daughter's relationship with her husband. A lot of highs and a lot of lows. When it was fun, it was really fun. And when there were bad times, they were bad times. She described Brian as someone who could become mean and hateful when he was drinking, who had gotten physical with Lynette more than once. Darlene said Lynette had left Brian multiple times over the years due to his alleged abuse, including one incident that left Lynette with visible bruising on her back. Lynette often took photos documenting her injuries as a reminder to herself not to go back, and yet she always went back. She photographed her own injuries to remind herself, to have proof, to tell herself, don't go back, don't go back, don't go back. And she went back every time. Because that is what this kind of relationship does to a person. It pulls you back in. It convinces you that the good times are real and the bad times were a mistake. And you love someone, even when loving them is dangerous. But here is the detail that makes this whole story even darker. Darlene revealed that Lynette had actually booked a plane ticket, a one-way ticket home about a month before she disappeared. She was planning to leave Brian for good. She had even confided in a friend that she was scared of being at sea with him. She had the ticket. She had the plan. She had told people she was scared. She was scared of being at sea with Brian. And then she went to sea with Brian. And she never came home.
Darlene also told Banfield she had consulted battered women's shelters, trying to get advice on how to help her daughter separate from her husband. A mother calling shelters for her adult daughter, trying to help her escape. And then getting the call that she was gone. Brian Hooker denies all of this. His attorney has stated he categorically denies ever harming Lynette. He told NBC News directly, "I said I'd never harm Lynette and I never would harm Lynette and I want to find Lynette." He has not been charged with any crime. The investigation is ongoing. But a mother's testimony, a daughter's ticket home, a friend she told she was afraid. These are not small things. These are the kinds of details that investigators do not ignore. There is one more thing Darlene brought to Ashleigh Banfield's reporting. And I want to be very careful and very respectful with how I present this, because this is deeply painful. Darlene shared photographs with Ashleigh Banfield showing injuries that Lynette sustained. Images Lynette had taken of herself to document what was happening behind closed doors. Lynette took those photos herself, of her own body, after what she said Brian had done. She kept them, like evidence, like a paper trail she hoped she might one day need, or that someone might one day find. And now, with Lynette gone, and Brian free, Her mother is the one showing those photos to the world. A woman who loved the ocean, who paddleboarded and snorkeled and chased sunsets on a sailboat called Soulmate, who took photos of herself when she was hurt, who bought a one-way ticket home, who told a friend she was scared, who smiled in one last photo at a pool bar in a green cover-up and then walked into the dark with her husband and was never seen again. This investigation is not over. The people asking questions are not stopping, and neither are we. If you've made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. Because staying with a story this heavy takes something out of you. And it should. Because Lynette was a real woman, with a real mother who called shelters for her, a real daughter who flew across the ocean to fight for her, real friends who knew she was scared. She deserves every minute of attention we can give this case. Share this video, right now, because the more pressure, the more eyes, the more noise we make, the harder it is for this to quietly disappear, the way Brian Hooker says Lynette did. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, because this story is developing, and we will be right here every time something new breaks.
One detail from the days after Brian's release sits quietly next to the photograph without competing with it. Brian did not sail soulmate out. He left the